Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtadar Khan, your host, and today I want to simply ask this question: how corrupt is Ukraine? As you're familiar, there has been a scandal recently. This week, the chief of staff of President Zelenskyy was raided by the National Anti-Corruption Bureau. And as a result of that, he's now resigning as perhaps the second most powerful person in Ukraine. And he's kind of trying to salvage his pride and his self-respect by saying, "Oh, now I will go and fight on the front." But the point really remains that in the past few years, since the war started, there has been continuous, like as frequent as I don't know what to say, scandals about corruption in Ukraine. I remember when the war started, one of my colleagues who studies human dignity and and human rights, etc., came to me and said, "Oh my God, I just took a look at Ukraine and they call it's a corrupt corrupt country." I said, "Yes, it is a very corrupt country. In fact, it was never rated as a democracy by the Democracy Index. It was a hybrid regime. It is a kleptocracy, and the West has tried to project it as a champion of democracy and defending democracy, etc., to justify a strategy of expanding NATO and pushing Russia back. So for the West, it has always been about putting Russia in its place. And it is not really about Ukraine. I think they have used Ukraine as a way, as an instrument to fight Russia, and have also used and, shall we say, praised Ukraine and as a champion of democracy, and Zelensky as this great hero who is trying to save the Western civilization and Europe from the marauding hordes coming from Russia. This image was necessary so that billions and billions of dollars of taxpayer money from Western countries could go into this war, which has been going on for over 4 years now. So, what I'm going to do is very simple. I tried to do some research and I found that there have been many scandals since the war started. So I'm going to just show you what these scandals are. So, but let me add a caveat. Just because something is in the media and has been covered does not mean that the case is fully prosecuted and that particular individual who has either resigned or been accused or arrested has been proven guilty of corruption and bribery and has been locked away. It doesn't mean that. And it also doesn't mean that these are the only cases of corruption. There could be 10,000 times more cases of corruptions which the Ukrainian government is unable to prosecute and investigate because they are understaffed and most of their people are on the battlefront already. About 20% of the population has left Ukraine and migrated as a result of the war. We could call they are displaced or forcibly migrated out of the country. But nevertheless, there have been many such cases, and I want to show them to you because leaders of Western countries constantly lie to their own citizens. For example, right now, Donald Trump has not said anything about the corruption in Zelensky's office, naturally, because he does not want to have a discussion about corruption at all. But nevertheless, people like Marco Rubio, who are in the process constantly negotiating with Ukraine, first they were in Geneva, now they are in Florida, uh, they have never asked this question as to about corruption, and it doesn't seem to bother Western democratic leaders. The corruption case against Netanyahu continues. In fact, Netanyahu is now applied for a pardon from the president. Donald Trump is pressuring Israel to pardon this corrupt Netanyahu. So apparently, the West and Western democracies are now okay with corruption. There is a law in the United States which says that American businesses cannot bribe people abroad to get, shall we say, in contracts and win contracts overseas. It's the Foreign Corruption Act or something like that. And Donald Trump, after he became president, the second Trump has instructed Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, not to start any new cases based on that law and not to go forward with the cases that are already in process that were started by the Biden administration. So India's richest man, Adani, for example, Gautam Adani, who was accused of corruption, uh, is now sitting pretty because Pam Bondi is not pursuing that case. So yes, there seems to be, like, Western democracy seems to be okay with corruption in a great scale, and to me that is quite a tragedy. But nevertheless, so let's look at some of the data that I have. Let me go back here. So this starts in March 2022. This is just a couple of weeks after the war starts. So various mid-level officials were accused of corruption. So this is early war profiteering. Officials in national administration overpriced food and fuel supplies for troops exposed by Ukraine's security services. So the money that is coming from Western countries, and this is, the aid hadn't begun yet, but the US was already providing billions of dollars to Ukraine since 2014. One reason why Ukraine was able to surprise everybody, including Russia, is because the US had already invested a lot of money and training and military equipment to Ukraine after the annexation of Crimea by Russia. So from 2014 till 2022, the US had already invested tons of money into strengthening Ukraine. So as soon as the war starts, the corruption starts. I'm not documenting anything before. It's quite possible there were cases in February and January of 2022, but here's the first case. It was about a $2 million corruption scandal that came out. And then again in July, the Deputy Minister of Defense, it's not nobody low, it's a Deputy Minister of Defense, overpricing of food rations for military, $40 million of basically tried to steal that much. Then in November, you had head of defense minister. These are all people who are getting money from the West. The US was just throwing billions of dollars at them by now. We were giving them weapons. We were giving them weapons to buy, money to buy weapons. We were giving them money to basically manage their budget. So the kind of money, and then humanitarian aid was also going to Ukraine. The total estimate is anywhere between 170 to 200 billion dollars. Sometimes the Trump administration claims that there are 300 billion dollars that were sent to Ukraine. So you can go and Google all of these events. You can pause my YouTube presentation and then look at all of these events and the names that I have provided, and you can go and Google. So in November 2022, you see a $10 million scandal. January 22, another deputy defense minister, and then February 20, head of state of customs. That is interesting. And then February 2023, then again April 2023, again military people, infrastructure minister, September, defense minister, again November 2023, high-ranking defense ministry officials, February 2024, deputy head. And then May, you have former defense minister. He's been charged another $40 million. And then here's some from the 2024 August. It keeps on going, and then you have this big one of embezzlement with the energy, the nuclear plant, etc., over $100 million, and now the chief of staff. A lot of these people who have been either charged or connected with or accused of corruption, a lot of them are all around and very close to Zelenskyy. These are not obscure professionals. You're not stopping and arresting a cop because he was, stopping people and then charging them, taking 10, 20 bucks. These are big procurement related corruptions, essentially stealing from the money that is coming from overseas. And there has been a lot of glorification of Ukrainians, and many of them have fought bravely for their country. I mean, Russia is such a bigger country, such a powerful country, and they are completely outnumbered by the Russian army, but they have stood toe to toe for the last 4 years. In fact, in the last 3 years, they have not lost much land at all. If you remember, in the first few months, Russia had taken about 20% of the land, and that is where we stay. I mean, of course, they've taken a little bit more in the past few months, but We are looking at like 1% additional perhaps in the last few months. So yes, many Ukrainians have fought, no doubt about it, but the leadership and the governments seems to be very, very corrupt. There are two anti-corruption units that work inside the Ukrainian government. One is NABU, National Anti-Corruption Bureau. This is essentially like the FBI of Ukraine, just focused on corruption. And then they have something called SAPO, which is Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutors. So this is basically the lawyers or the government, like the Department of Justice. They're the ones who will prosecute. So these two units work. And then very recently, Zelenskyy passed a law to curb the authority and control these things. He basically passed a law that took away the independence and autonomy of this and brought it directly under his own control. So he could decide which cases could go forward, which cases had to be dropped right away, which cases. So, I mean, it was amazing that he had the courage and the guts to essentially sabotage the entire anti-corruption process in Ukraine. Now, you must understand that Ukraine is a very corrupt country. So, what is there to say that those who are actually doing the investigations of anti-corruption themselves are not corrupt? So, in this entire corrupt atmosphere, Zelenskyy was trying to take away. And that's when the Western countries at least came forward and started screaming about it. They put a lot of pressure, especially the Europeans, because they also have this process by which Ukraine is trying to become a member of the European Union, which means they have to clean up this act. They can't take this because then they're going to start stealing European Union money. As it is, most of the money that they are stealing is either American or European. So they will continue the same corrupt practices inside the European Union. So this process by which Ukraine can become part of European Union is now being investigated, and the Europeans have put a lot of pressure, and so have Americans. They have tried to prevent corruption by providing weapons rather than cash. So it is interesting that Western countries have become acutely aware of the pilfering of cash by Ukrainian leaders. And so they have been already taking measures to try and reduce the scope for corruption. But they have never tied it to aid directly, saying that, well, if you don't clean this up, we will stop all aid. They continue to do that. And I'm surprised that the Trump administration has not made an issue out of this. And which is a shame, because I guess the Trump administration does not want to have any conversation about corruption in the government. But there are a couple of things that is clear, that a lot of people who have been very close to Zelenskyy are corrupt and have been corrupt and have been exposed. And those who have not been exposed or not been charged, it doesn't mean that they are not corrupt. It's quite possible that they have not yet been investigated or there's not evidence available. But I did try and search and try to see if there has been any investigation into Zelenskyy himself. And I did not find that. And there is no investigation or any suggestion that Zelenskyy himself is corrupt. There are lots of accusations that he has secret bank accounts where he's hiding millions and millions of dollars. We don't know that. There is no evidence provided, but I also suspect that the Western countries, because they are so committed to this war, especially Europeans are so committed to this war with Russia, to continue it, to prolong it as long as possible. And they need Zelenskyy for that. So even if they do have evidence, I don't think they will expose Zelenskyy, because if Zelenskyy has to go away, then we wouldn't know. This has already become a scandal in Ukraine. When Zelenskyy tried to undermine the anti-corruption bureau, NABU and SAPO and others, and bring them under his direct control, for the first time during wartime, there were anti-Zelenskyy protests, very strong protests in Ukrainian. Ordinary people understood that this was an attempt to make sure that corruption investigations don't go ahead. And so Zelenskyy was going to get away with it, but he had to reverse and change the law All of this happened just in the last couple of months. He had to change the law basically and restore the autonomy and independence of the Anti-Corruption Bureau. And guess what happened? The first big case after he restores the autonomy of NABU is his own chief of staff. His house is raided because NABU suspects him of basically pilfering money. So that is, I'm wondering whether Zelensky, in order to protect those around him who are corrupt, was trying to sabotage the anti-corruption process. So to me, that is worrisome. It is also worrisome that the West, for geopolitical interests, is always ready to abandon values. They let go Adani. Trump is not prosecuting the Adani case. There's nothing going on there. Netanyahu, who has some people thought he was prolonging the war just to escape accountability from the legal system for his corruption. And then Donald Trump has been pressuring the Israeli president to pardon him, Netanyahu, for his corrupt. And so Netanyahu has just submitted a letter to the president requesting pardon for corruption, which means he's acknowledging that he's corrupt. I haven't seen that letter, but he is asking for pardon. I'm sure that, I guess, when you pardon somebody, the person who is being pardoned has to at least acknowledge that they have committed some crime. It's not as if Netanyahu is going to go and say, "Look, I didn't do anything, but the courts have been prosecuting me, so pardon me." So if you've not done anything, why would you be pardoned? So that is another thing. There's a lot of other corruptions. Sarkozy, the former president of France, has just gone to jail. And then he was let go after 24 hours, I think, or less than that, or maybe he stayed in the prison for a week. First, they said there was going to be special guards with Sarkozy in the prison, and then now, I guess, he's been sent home. So there's no accountability there. So the leaders of Western democracies these days are corrupt. The entire Epstein files fiasco is all about corruption. It's all about corruption, that Epstein was able to blackmail leaders in the United States and other parts of the world. There's also stories coming out that perhaps people around Narendra Modi also are in the Epstein files. So we'll see when someone does a more thorough investigative job with that issue also. But nevertheless, these so-called leaders of democracies have become increasingly corrupt because there's so much money out there these days in politics. Billionaires willing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in shaping policy and laws in countries, and politicians finding ways and means to take that money legally as well as illegally. If you remember, a couple of years ago, there was all this case of members of the European Parliament who were arrested and caught red-handed with cash, with suitcases full of cash. So we see this whole trend of corruption. And the good news is that at least there are institutions which are exposing some of this corruption. And then there are other cases where that corruption is not being exposed at all. In the last few months, since Donald Trump became president, there has been a tremendous growth in the net worth of his family. They've suddenly become very rich. And a lot of their new businesses, whether it is cryptocurrency or otherwise, are sort of kind of dovetailing with the new policies of the administration. So there is a systemic, shall we say, trend of corruption in Western democracies, and that's not a good thing, I think. So anyway, that's all I wanted to share. That Ukraine is a very corrupt country, and I think American leaders and European leaders must be honest with their taxpayers. Most of people in America who pay taxes. Look, the rich guys don't pay taxes. Billionaires don't pay taxes. They get incentives from the government for their businesses. Many of them don't even take salaries. They take capital gains, and that's where they start this. Like, for example, in the United States, I think the rate for capital gains income tax rate is 14%. So you could get a salary of $1 trillion and pay only 14% tax, whereas somebody who is like a professor or a school teacher who makes $100,000 pays 20-25% tax. So it's the middle class and working class people who are paying a lot of taxes, and the money that is going to these foreign countries. Billions of dollars to Israel, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine, also to protect other countries for the bases that America maintains in Europe, etc. All of this money comes from middle class taxpayers, and while they don't have benefits at home, health insurance is going through the roof. The mortgage prices are going up, education, housing, everything has become unaffordable in the United States. We see that corruption has become systemic in Western societies, and that's not good news at all. So thank you for watching Conversations. I'm Muqtadar Khan, your host. If this is the first time you've come to the channel, please subscribe to Conversations, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share it with your socio-political network. Until next time, I'm your host, Muqtadar Khan. Take care.